Alright guys, BLM here, back with a new video. In this video, I'll finally get around to doing my season rankings for International Survivor. Now, by International Survivor, I mean every English language season of Survivor released outside of the United States. So in this video, we'll be ranking 18 seasons. There are 2 seasons of Survivor UK, 2 seasons of Survivor New Zealand, 7 total seasons of Australian Survivor, obviously 5 from the Channel 10 series and 2 from before that, and then 7 seasons of Survivor South Africa. Now there's one season that I have not watched yet, and that's because it's not publicly available online, and that is Survivor Africa Panama, which was a pan-regional season, so that will not be included on the list. But obviously expect spoilers for all these seasons. I will be talking about how each of these seasons play out, so don't watch if you don't want to get spoiled. With that out of the way, let's get started with the list, starting at number 18. So number 18, the worst season of International Survivor, and spoiler, the worst season of Survivor I've ever watched. And this even includes like College Survivor and like these fan-made Survivor seasons I've watched. This is the worst season of Survivor ever. And again, that's a spoiler for whenever I get around to doing my global Survivor season ranking, but this season's terrible, and that is Survivor UK Season 2, also known as Survivor UK Panama, and what a terrible season. This season sucks so bad, and it's really like mind-blowing how much went wrong with this season. I mean, one, started off, it's a smaller cast, it's only 12 people. The way the game plays out is it starts off at 12, they merge at 8, and they get down to a final 2. And the problem with this is that we start off with 2 tribes of 6. However, both tribes have a very clear majority on both of them. And that leads to the entire pre-merge being 4 relatively boring vote outs. I mean, I think the Lee vote out was probably a little bit more interesting, but they're all relatively boring. I mean, Taefun is a pre-merge boot who's probably one of the only good characters on the season. Everyone else is just so bland. And we get to the merge where the tribes come in 4 and 4. So you're thinking like, oh, are they going to battle it out? Is someone going to flip? It's like, no. They literally make an agreement to send their weakest person of both their tribes to a challenge that's essentially going to dictate the rest of the game. Because the tiebreaker challenge literally dictates the game. Because the side that wins that ends up steamrolling the other side, becomes the final 4. And within that 4-person group, there's a very clear 3. So that 4th person, Bridget, gets voted out unanimously, and we get a little bit of intrigue, I guess. I mean, not really though, right? Because like at the final 3, Susanna, who was the 3rd out of that 3, wins immunity and gets to decide who she's going to take to the end. And essentially she picks the winner because she has no chance of winning the game, and she ends up taking Johnny to the end. Johnny wins unanimously, and this is actually a scenario where it would have been a lot more interesting if one of the other 2 had won immunity and voted out Susanna, as a final 2 with John and Johnny would have been very, very interesting to see who wins. I do think Johnny still wins anyway, but it would have been interesting to see. While here, Susanna just takes all the suspense out of the game by winning final immunity and essentially picking the winner right there. Like, this season could not have gone worse. It's such a bad season in every single way. Again, not to mention the fact that the cast is so boring. Like, no one is intriguing on this cast outside of maybe Taefun. He's an early boot. When the majority of the confessionals on the season are done by Susanna and John, you know that something's wrong. So, I mean, overall, this is such a bad season. It's a terrible season. It lands here at number 18. Now, number 17, we're continuing on with another bad season of Survivor, and that is Australian Survivor 2002, also known as the original Australian Survivor, again, the one before the Network 10 series. And, I mean, this season sucks, too. The one redeeming factor about the season, the main thing that keeps it out of the very, very bottom, is that it has a very strong winner. I mean, Rob Dixon is one of the best winners in the history of the show. And it's really a travesty that he isn't remembered more fondly from the community, as he has a very dominant win. I mean, I don't even think it's until even Tom Westman you can even debate his win. And like, even then, I think his win's probably better than Tom Westman. It's probably not until Earl that he really has someone that played a better game than him. So I think that is an interesting aspect of the season. However, everything else about the season sucks. It's so boring. It's slow paced. It's really dragged out. It's also just has one of the most boring casts in the history of the show. I mean, like, outside of Rob, I guess Katie, I guess Craig, like, everyone else on the cast is so boring. The game plays out in a very mundane way where, again, like, pre-merge, there's a lot of just really easy boots there coming to the merge. It's a very clear 7-3 majority, and we get a straight up pagonging there. And then even when they do have to cannibalize each other, there's a very clear pecking order there. And Rob Dixon does make a pretty big move at the final 6, but even after that, it becomes another pagonging, just of a different group. And like gameplay wise, it's not super fun to watch. Like, it's not a fun season. It's a very slow and dry season. But I do think, again, having Rob Dixon there play an extremely dominant game is what keeps it out of the very bottom for me. Now, number 16, we have a season that plays out very similarly to Australian Survivor 2002, and that is Survivor UK Season 1. Survivor UK, PULAU TIGA. And, I mean, spoiler alert, that's it for Survivor UK. Yeah, what a great series that was, right? Survivor UK Season 1 here, it's pretty bad. I mean, the thing about it is that it's very slow-paced as well. I mean, it's shot in a very, like, a documentary style. Like, unlike Survivor Borneo, where a lot of the show is the confessionals and the players giving confessionals that describe what's going on, here it's mostly edited in a way that, like, the narrator is the host and he's talking about what's going on more so than the actual players themselves. So that aspect of it is weird. I do think cast-wise it is stronger than AU 2002. I mean, by a mile. I mean, like, AU 2002 is just so boring. And not saying this cast is great. It's certainly not. But I do think there's more memorable figures from it. I do also think there's more gameplay in this season. I mean, even though the game actually plays out very similarly, where, again, they come into the merge with one tribe with the numbers. They pagong the other tribe. However, one person's able to be left standing, and then Richard flips the game, kind of similar to what Rob Dixon does. But I do think the outcome is a lot more disappointing, where, again, at least Rob Dixon won AU 2002. Here, Richard loses in the final 3. And again, it's his own fault. He made a mistake of taking Charlotte to the final 3. But to see Richard not win this game is very disappointing. But again, I think you got to credit a few things here too as well, is that there are some pretty big strategic players here. Again, Richard is someone that played the game very strategically. He flipped the game at the final 6. He dragged along a goat and Jackie. Again, I think the problem is that he brought Charlotte to the end, someone who could also win immunity and could also drag that goat to the end. You have James, someone within the minority alliance is telling everyone in the minority to split their votes across a whole bunch of people in the case that the tiebreaker comes up, which in this season, the tiebreaker is still previous votes, and is able to really manipulate that, and that really helps out Charlotte at the final 6. And like overall, and there is some intrigue to this season, but overall, it's still not a great season. It's not a season that is particularly fun to watch, so it still lands here at number 16. Now, number 15, we're finally onto a more modern season. Though, I mean, if you were watching it, you wouldn't know it's a modern season. That's Survivor New Zealand Season 1, also known as Survivor New Zealand Nicaragua. And this is a season that I will admit, when I first watched it, I watched it as it was airing, I actually enjoyed it a lot more than other people. Like, people always talk about how boring this season was, how it was filled with people who didn't want to play the game. And while that is true, I had fun watching it the first time. I felt like I had people I liked on the season, people I was rooting for. But then on the rewatch, I've rewatched the season twice since then, it definitely does not hold up. It is a really slow and dry season. And the thing is, I think it's purely production's fault for why this season's as bad as it is. I think if we look at like the flaws of the season, which for me are the extended episodes, the fact that the episodes are over an hour long, but also the fact that they decided to make each cycle of the game 2 episodes, with one episode ending in the Redemption Island duel and the other episode ending with the vote out. And that really slows the pace of the season dramatically and makes it exponentially worse. And I think also having Redemption Island at the end of the game, where 2 people come back just to be voted out again in the exact same fashion, is just so boring. And I think mixing that in with the fact that the cast is also, I mean, as people mentioned, like, again, not super game-centric. I mean, there are some people that are playing the game pretty dynamically, and I do think watching them play is pretty fun. But I mean, like, overall, it is filled with people that didn't want to play the game super hard, and those are the people that led the charge a lot of the season. People like Avi and Sala and Barb and Nate, and these people that just weren't playing the game super hard. But I do think this season, if it was edited down to like 12 episodes, 12 hour-long episodes instead of what it was, which was like, 20 full hour-long episodes, I feel like it would have been a much stronger season. It would have been actually a probably mid-tier season, but because of the flaws that it has, it ends up being very low on the list here in the bottom tier for me. Now, number 14, we're finally on to Survivor South Africa, and we have Survivor South Africa Season 2, also known as Survivor South Africa, Malaysia. And this is just a very dull season. I mean, this is one that's very tough to rank for me because I feel like Survivor South Africa Season 2 is the season that I remember the least out of all these seasons, out of every single season we'll be talking about here. And I feel like that's to the fault of the season as a whole, but also it's just like even when watching it, I remember just being kind of meh on it. Like, it's a season that has such a forgettable cast and also just a very unlikable cast. There aren't very many likable figures on this season. I mean, there are some big characters. I mean, like Dyke and Hein and like Angie and Manla, and there's some big characters on this season, but for the most part, this is a pretty dry cast. I mean, almost no one is actually playing the game too strategically. And Grant does play pretty strategically. He talks in the confessional very strategically, but I feel like he's one of those people that talks a big game, but then in actuality, he's kind of just there. Like, he's not really doing too much, though he does get to the end. I do think he should have won personally, but again, like, I do feel like there were some pretty big holes in his game. But again, for me, it's just like most of the season is just so blah. I mean, like, the entire pre-merge is pretty dry to me. I mean, there's a couple like more memorable characters there, like Elsie and Rajesh, but it's like, for the most part, a lot of those people are really non-factors, and that's a lot of the reason why I have this season ranked as low as it is. Now, number 13, we're on to probably the biggest train wreck of a season ever. Like, a lot of people say, oh, Survivor Gabon, that's the train wreck season of Survivor. It's like, no, this is, and that is Australian Celebrity Survivor, also known as Australian Survivor 2006, and oh my God, what is this season? Like, it's such a bizarre season to watch, and a lot of that is why it's not at the very bottom, is because there are so many strange elements to this season that do make it very comical on the rewatch. I mean, there's so many like weird random twists that are thrown in there for like no reason. We start off the season with like men versus women, where like there's only 4 men and 5 women for some reason, but then like randomly in the middle of nowhere, like a woman joins the men's tribe and a guy joins the women's tribe, no reason. And then at the immunity challenge, the first immunity challenge, the winner of that challenge gets a reward in a Navy SEAL that joins the game on their tribe. It's like, why? And if this is a celebrity season, why is some random Navy SEAL joining the season? It's so dumb, especially because he just gets voted out the very next round. And he's like the dullest person alive, too. Like, it makes no sense. And because these are celebrities, you can very clearly tell that a lot of these people aren't even taking this experience seriously. Like, none of them are actually trying to really play the game to win. Like, some of these people are just making moves just to make moves. They're just doing things just to make good TV. And I will say, though, like, because these are celebrities, it does make good TV. I mean, like, they are interesting to watch. Though, yeah, a lot of that's because of the train wreck factor of the season. I mean, I do think like David Oldfield is a really fun character on this season. I think Imogen and Nicole are pretty fun to watch. Even like Amber and Fiona in the pre-merge were pretty interesting characters. But I think the biggest tragedy of the season is obviously the end game. What ends up happening when we get to the final 3, they decide, you know what, let's bring back 2 of the jury members into the game, which, mind you, the jury started at the final 7. So there are 4 jury members. They get to compete in the challenge, and 2 of them return to the game at the final 3, which is ridiculous. And those 2 end up getting to the end. They end up being the final 2. Like, I will say that it is impressive that Justin was able to convince them to do something that was completely against their best interest in voting out David at the final 5. And then from there, they have this really broken tiebreaker rule where there was a tie between Justin and Nicole, and the tiebreaker was that the jury got to vote someone out for some reason. Why is that a thing? Again, such a broken rule, but Nicole gets voted out there. Justin wins final immunity and votes out Imogen, and we get to a final 2 of Guy and Justin, which is just such a terrible final 2. And even then, I feel like the jury votes for the wrong person. Because at least, like, for me, at least Justin was the most instrumental person in getting them to the end. He was the one that convinced Imogen and Nicole to vote out David, but nope, Guy wins, and it's really just such a train wreck of a season. But again, it's kind of a fun train wreck to watch for me. That is why it is here at number 13. Now at number 12, we actually have a season that is almost the exact same, but without celebrities. And that is Survivor South Africa, Panama, also known as Survivor South Africa Season 1. And, I mean, if you really look at it, it plays out in a very similar way. I mean, this is a season that, again, we come into the merge, we have a pagonging, but then at the final 3, the 4 jury members get to come back, do a challenge, the 2 returning to the game, and then the best player of the season gets blindsided at the final 5, which is a fantastic move. Again, like, you got to give Vanessa credit for pulling off that move, because that was an incredible move to blindside Gareth there, but also robs us of what would have been one of the best winners ever. Then for me, the problem, though, is that after that, the rest of the game's decided by challenges. The final 4, the loser of that challenge is automatically eliminated, while the winner gets an automatic spot in the final 2, and then the 2 people in the middle compete in another challenge where the loser of that gets eliminated, the winner goes to the final 2. Not particularly great. I don't like that either. However, I will say the reason why I do have this above Australian Celebrity Survivor is because I do feel like the cast overall is much stronger. And I feel like it was a cast that was more willing to play the game. I think we see more gamers here than we do on Australian Celebrity Survivor. And I think there's more likable personalities as a whole. Again, like, I think you had like Gareth, you had Zane, you had Imzy, Vanessa, I mean, Lizelle. I mean, I think there were likable people and fun people to watch from this season. I think as a whole, it is a bit more of a grounded season in comparison to Australian Celebrity Survivor, which is just all around just a wacky show. So for me, that was enough to land it here at number 12. Now at number 11, we're finally on to a modern season. It's actually the most recent season. It is Australian Survivor All-Stars. And I've already talked about this. I didn't particularly care for this season. I just found it to be overall pretty boring season of reality television, especially after the merge. I mean, I think the post-merge was such a slog. And like outside of the Zach vote out, it was just really, really dull there. And then even the pre-merge, I felt like so much of that was pretty dull as well. I mean, I think the first few episodes were very, very strong. I think everything with the David and Matt relationship was really fun. Obviously, Daisy blindside's really great. I think the Jericho blindside's really fun as well. I think the Phoebe storyline's really good as well, where the Phoebe blindside's pretty fun to watch. But everything outside of that, I feel like is really, really slow. I feel like it has the same issues that Australian Survivor just in general has, which is really bloated episodes and really poor pacing, and adding that in with the non-elimination episodes, and just overall, I mean, there just are a bevy of issues for me, plus also the uneven editing, where David gets so much of the content within the season, and he's mostly just saying the exact same thing over and over and over again, which is, again, a complaint about Australian Survivor just in general. So I think mixing in my just initial complaints of Australian Survivor with the fact that I just found this season to be very dull and very dark and just something that wasn't really fun to watch, it makes it land here at number 11. Now number 10, we're back to Survivor South Africa, and we have Survivor South Africa Santa Carolina, also known as Survivor South Africa Season 3. And this is a season that I think is a season of 2 halves. I think the first half of the season is pretty bad. It's pretty boring, filled with a lot of people who are non-factors in the overall season. However, I think the back half is incredible. I think it's really, really fun to watch Ashley Hayden have her run at the very end of the game, but I also feel like there's some intrigue earlier on in the merge as well, with a lot of tied vote manipulation, a lot of people like trying to fight for Isaac's vote, and I think that's a really interesting aspect of those first like 3 rounds of the merge there. So that post-merge for me is really incredible. Again, that pre-merge, though, is pretty dry, and I think the cast as a whole is on the weaker side. It is a celebrity season, and you do have some people on here that clearly don't care about the game at all. And I mean, we have Jub Jub quitting the game due to getting a rash on his genitals, and that's a very funny scene from one of the first few episodes. But I mean, overall, though, this is a very mixed season for me. Again, it's half really dull and boring and filled with pointless twists, kind of similar to Australian Survivor 2006, but the other half is really incredible. So for me, those things put together lands it here at number 10. Now number 9, we're going back to Australian Survivor, and we have Australian Survivor Champions versus Contenders 2. And I know people won't agree with this opinion because a lot of people have this as the best international season. I never particularly cared for this season. For me, it kind of suffers from the same issues as Australian Survivor All-Stars in that, again, editing is very heavy-handed. You very clearly know Pia is the winner from so early on. Plus also like half the cast is pretty much ignored in the edit, where we know pretty much nothing about some of these people that are going home, like Hannah and Casey and Susie, and like some of these people that, like, who cares when they're going home? It's like, yes, their vote outs are actually pretty interesting, again, especially the Hannah one, the Susie one, but it's like, who cares about these people? Like, we know nothing about them. Like, obviously the back half of the season has one of the best casts in the history of the show. I mean, like, I think when we look at the people that make it far into the game, I mean, you have Pia, you have Luke, you have Harry, you have Janine, you have, I mean, like, a Sean, Daisy, I mean, like, a whole bunch of fantastic players/characters. I almost forgot to mention, like, Abby, and again, like, John, and like, there's a whole bunch of interesting people there. It's just that pre-merge just feels like a slaughtering of all the people that no one cares about, and I feel like it makes that part of the season just feel so blah to me. And even then, by the time we get to the merge, it's like the David blindside's like built up as this really big moment for the season, but it's like, it was very predictable. I mean, like, it's been set up for the last few episodes now. It's like, obviously that was going to happen. And while we do have some pretty interesting rounds later on, like when Abby and Luke flip on champions and vote out Simon, and the final 5 round is really interesting where Abby goes home, like, those are interesting rounds, but I think overall it's just the format of Australian Survivor really harms this, and then the new level of how uneven the edit is really harmed this season for me, so it lands here at number 9. Now, number 8, we're keeping with Australian Survivor, but we're going back to Australian Survivor Season 1, or Australian Survivor 2006, in the first season of the 10-play series, and have a mixed opinion on the season as a whole. I mean, if you asked me like a year ago, the season probably would have been a lot lower on the list, but I do think as time has gone on, like, the more I just like kind of sit on the season without actually going back and rewatching it, I feel like it's a season that goes up in my estimations. Like, that pre-merge of the season is incredible. Again, it's another one of these seasons that's like, it's a season of two halves. The pre-merge of the season is incredible. The entire way through, it's amazing. I mean, there's a couple episodes that are kind of like the Barry boot, the Tegan boot, but it's like, for the most part, it's a very good pre-merge. Get off to a great start with Dez and all of his stuff. Evan Blindside's really great. The double tribal is really great. The post swap is incredible. The entire story of like Phoebe during that and watching her blindside. Craig is really great. I mean, obviously we have the Rowan blindside, which is really fun. There's so much great stuff in that pre-merge. But then we have the post-merge, and the post-merge just sucks. I mean, the post-merge is just so terrible. Where outside of the Brooke blindside, the final 7, it's a very big slog. And even at the end where Christy wins, I just find that such a underwhelming outcome to the season, because, like, I mean, Christy is just such a bad player. And it's really annoying to me, even to this day, that through her essentially making up stuff at Final Tribal, she gets to win. And again, all credit to her that she was able to make stuff up that people believed. But one, I don't feel like she feels like she was making up stuff. I feel like she legitimately believed it. And two, it's still very frustrating that that's how she wins the game. But I mean, overall, like, Australian Survivor 2016, I adore that first half. That first half is incredible. Some of the best Survivor ever, possibly. But that second half really just drags on, and it's really just not fun to watch. So at the end of the day, it lands here at number 8. Now, number 7, we're going back to Survivor South Africa, and we're actually going to be stuck with Survivor South Africa for a little while here. But here we have Survivor South Africa Maldives, and I think this is probably the most underrated international season ever. I think this is a season that almost no one talks about. And it feels like people only go back to watch the season if they're doing like a full series rewatch of South Africa. It's a very upper middle tier season for me. Like, it's a season that's filled with really great characters. I mean, you have like Heike, you have Tijan, you have Bonnie, you have Allison, Roxy. I mean, there's a lot of really fun characters on this season. But I think you also have some really fun gameplay. I mean, like, while there's still this like, oh, we're the good people sort of mentality within the season, there's still a lot of fun gameplay within it. I mean, Tijan's like really playing his ass off earlier on in the game. I still think that final 6 round of the game is like one of the most fascinating rounds in all of International Survivor, where essentially one side wins out through a bevy of different style of advantages, where the Heike, Bonnie, Let's It Go side has immunity necklace, they have the white cowrie, and they have immunity idol, which through the use of those 3 things, they win out that vote no matter what. I mean, the season just has a whole bunch of great blindsides. I mean, a successful idol play by Roxy in the pre-merge. I mean, the first vote where Lacanio goes home is a really big mind blower there. I don't love the general premise of the season, which was celebs versus plebs, or essentially celebrities versus normal people. Which, I mean, the theme itself isn't bad. I don't like how they executed it, where they split into 2 tribes of 9, where one tribe had 5 celebrities, 4 normal people. The other one had 5 normal people, 4 celebrities. I don't particularly like that premise just in general, but I do think there's just fascinating elements about the season as a whole. Really great characters, really fun gameplay. You have Let's Go completely blowing up her game at the end. I think that's fun. Like, it's a fun season. I think this is a great overall season of Survivor. Lands here number 7. Now number 6, we have a season that probably has lower lows than Maldives. I think Maldives is definitely a more consistent season, but I do think this season has higher highs, and that is Survivor South Africa Champions, also known as Season 5. And I mean, I think Champions is just a fantastic season overall. I think it has a fantastic cast. There's a bevy of really fun blindsides. I mean, you got the Shane blindside, the Xavion blindside, Solly blindside, Moira blindside, Steven blindside. I mean, just a bevy of really fun blindsides. A lot of just fun dynamics throughout the season. This is a fantastic season that is harmed by a couple things. It's harmed by the Champions twist, which is essentially 2 sports players get to captain each of the tribes, not as players, but just as coaches. And then they do get a jury vote at the end of the game. Essentially a more impactful version of Island of the Idols. But also, this season's very bloated. It's an 18-episode season with some non-elimination episodes and really just overall bloated editing, where the episodes are probably much longer than they need to be. But if you take those away, again, I think this is another season that if you were to re-edit the season, I think it becomes a much stronger season as a whole. I think it becomes a top tier season. It becomes one of the best seasons ever made. Like, it's really up there. I mean, so many great moments. Again, the Shane blindside with 2 idols in his pocket. I mean, just overall, just watching the gameplay of Graham, who is a very Tony-like player, but in a very calm and mellow personality. Like, it's a really strange thing to watch, but it is really interesting. Again, like the first vote of the season, he flips the entire game on Xavion's group and blindsides Ashley there, like right off the bat, and that's fascinating to watch. It's a great season. It really is. It just has those fundamental flaws that, again, are mostly based around production and not what actually happened within the game, not the actual players of the game. So that is one of the biggest downsides there. But for me, it's Survivor South Africa Champions lands here at number 6. Now number 5. At number 5, we're on to another season of Survivor South Africa. And here we have the latest season of the show, Survivor South Africa Island of Secrets. And I will 100% say I know I like this season more than most people. I know a lot of people are very low on this season. They don't find it fun to watch. They think, there's a lot of negativity around the season. There's a lot of quote-unquote bullying going on that isn't particularly great. I mean, it isn't fun at certain points in the season. But I think this season is benefited by a couple things. I think, one, its cast is fantastic. I think all around, this is one of the best casts in history of the show. And I think that's something that Survivor South Africa has really perfected recently, is casting really interesting people. And I think something that I also personally find fascinating, that I know other people find boring, is I love watching Rob dominate the game. I think watching him dominate the game in the way that he does is just so fascinating to see how he does everything, especially because he is like the main narrator of the season, and through that we're able to see every little thing that he does, like how he approaches his relationship with Darao, how he manages using Island of the Idols, how he's building relationships with like Mike and trying to coerce him into not targeting him. Like, there's a lot of really great things within this season that Rob does, and I think all those things make this season a lot better to watch. But even without him, we also have a lot of other fun characters. I mean, Jacques and Sipe and Nicole are really fun to watch. Darao is a really funny character on this show. Mike is a really fun underdog. I mean, there's so many great moments from the season. The final 5 round is just insane. Like, when Rob plays his idol for Nicole, Nicole plays her idol for Darao. Again, that's really insane. Final 6 round where like Mike figures out everything, and like we have that really fun tribal where like Mike's trying to tell Darao exactly what happens. I find that really fun to watch. The Ting Ting Boo is really fun in the pre-merge where Jock essentially takes out his own closest ally. And for me, I just find this such a fascinating season. I really love watching this season. Again, it is lower on the list. It is at number 5 here, largely due to, again, I understand people's complaints. I do understand that the season is slow at points. Like, it's not a perfectly paced season. It's not a very consistent season all around. But for me personally, I got a lot more enjoyment out of it than a lot of other people. So it lands here at number 5. Now, number 4, we're finally back to Survivor New Zealand, the only other season in Survivor New Zealand, the one that we haven't talked about yet. We got Survivor New Zealand Season 2, also known as Survivor New Zealand Thailand, and I think this is a great season of the show. I mean, it's another one that, I think International Survivor in general has this issue of bloated episodes, and New Zealand Season 2 still has that element. Again, not nearly as bad as Season 1, but these episodes are probably a bit longer than what they need to be. I do think the editing style is a bit slower than I would particularly care for. But outside of that, it's a fantastic season. Again, another one of an all-time great cast. I mean, yes, there's some duds there. I mean, namely like Tara is a really big dud. But, I mean, again, there's so many great characters. Lisa, Adam, Dave and Matt had a really interesting dynamic there, even though that was completely by accident. But I do think watching that storyline was really fun. Aaron was another really interesting personality to watch. I mean, Dylan and JT both had a lot of fun moments, despite being pre-merge boots. I mean, I think overall this is a great season, with, again, another one of a bevy of fun blindsides, like the Matt blindside being, again, a 3-2-1 against someone with an idol in his pocket, with him being voted out by someone who was his best friend from high school. Is just incredible. Even then, the Brad blindside is really fun. Josh blindside from the pre-merge is really great. The Keisha blindside from the pre-merge is really great. I mean, again, there's so many fun elements of this season. And again, like, comparing this to like Season 1, it's like night and day. It's like they improved upon everything from Season 1. Like, it's literally better in every single way. Like, mind you, there's still some issues, but it's still better than everything Season 1 did. And it's such a shame that we're never going to get a Season 3, largely due to how Season 2 didn't perform as well as they would have liked. But I still look at this as a fantastic season. I mean, this probably is one of the better International Survivor seasons, probably one of the ones that I would recommend as a first season to watch. Again, it's just really satisfying ride from beginning to end, really satisfying winner, really fulfilling storylines throughout. For me, lands here number 4. Now number 3, and we have what is probably looked at as the best season of Australian Survivor, and through that, probably the best season of International Survivor ever. And I've never fully agreed with that. Obviously, it is very good. It is this high. I do have my faults with it, and that is Australian Survivor Season 2, also known as Australian Survivor 2017. And this is a great season. I mean, it has a really good cast. I mean, there's so many really memorable figures here, like Jericho and Luke and Henry, Lockie, Michelle, Tessa. I mean, so many memorable figures there. But I also feel like it suffers from the things that Australian Survivor has issues with. Again, really bloated editing, even more so here. The first 2 seasons of Australian Survivor are even more bloated, where 2 episodes longer, more non-elimination episodes. The editing here is still pretty bloated, still longer than what they need to be. But I do think this was a massive step up from Season 1. I do think overall the cast is probably stronger as a whole, though there are some duds. I mean, there's some pretty big duds in my opinion on this season. But this is definitely a cast that was more willing to play the game, more actively playing the game. I mean, definitely a cast filled with more fans of the show. And some really insane moves are pulled off, like the 3-2 to 2-2 vote. The Henry blindside with him having an idol in his pocket. The Adam vote out's really fun. The Amy vote out's really fun. I do love this season as a whole. There's so many fun moments within it. And again, you have characters like Luke, AK, and Henry really carrying the show, even when the gameplay isn't the strongest. But again, it's just such a bloated season as a whole. And again, it's just something I'm always going to say with Australian Survivor. It's just, the season is longer than what it needs to be. And I think that, mixing in with the fact that the end game isn't particularly great. I mean, like, the final 4 round's fantastic. The final 4 round where Jericho saves himself, gets Tara to cause a tie, wins fire making, that's fantastic. But a lot of the stuff from the point where after the 3-2 to 2-2 vote, I think the season really slows down significantly. So for me, that's enough to land it here at number 3. So now we're at the top 2, and essentially we have 1 season of Australian Survivor left, and we have 1 season of Survivor South Africa left. And for me, this was very close. However, I did end up going with, at number 2 here, we do have Australian Survivor Champions versus Contenders 1. And I know people don't agree with my opinion on this season. Anyway, I've seen a lot of people say this is the worst season of Australian Survivor. But there's something about this season that I really just loved. And I really don't know how to fully explain it. Because, I mean, I do think it has issues. It does have a very uneven edit, where people like a Benji and like Matt Rogers and Sharn get a good chunk of the airtime. And even then, like, Benji doesn't get any airtime until episode 7, right? It's a ridiculously long streak of him getting nothing on this show until he just like skyrockets to become the biggest character of the season. It's a really strange way they edited him. But a lot of people say that the pre-merge of this season is really boring, and I never really found that to be the case. I mean, yes, there are points that are pretty slow. I mean, probably episodes 3 through 6 are probably the slowest stretch of the season. But I do think the first 2 episodes are very strong. The entire storyline of Russell Hantz is really great. And I think once Benji becomes a massive figure, I think it becomes a lot more fun of a show. I think it's fun to see him targeting the Tegan and Heaths of the world, and to see Tegan come back and him having to deal with that. I think all that's really fun. And then even then, like, as I said, at the merge on is incredible. I mean, like, the setup to the Matt Rogers blindside makes that vote out so satisfying. And the actual vote out itself is just ridiculous, where it's a 5-4 vote. He has an idol in his pocket. Sharn is about to play her idol on him. Benji convinces her not to, and he for some reason still doesn't play his idol and then gets blindside out of the game. It's incredible. And to follow that up with the Benji blindside, where it becomes a 4-4 vote, where Monica and Brian flip back, vote him out, and they flip back again, and it's just a really fascinating season to watch overall for me. And again, Dead Man Walking, that twist wasn't particularly great, but I think the end game's really fun, where Shane and Sharn really scrape out to make it out to the final 2 there. I think that's really great. We get an ending of a 5-4 vote where Shane barely pulls it out over Sharn. I think that's all just really fun to watch. I do have a lot of fun watching this season, especially the back half of the season. I think the back half of the season is one of the best post-merge stretches in any season of the show, of any season of Survivor. And I don't think the pre-merge is as bad as people say. So overall for me, lands here number 2. And now number 1, we have a season that I've heard some people call overrated, and I do think that's probably the case, to be honest. I do think even when I was watching this for the first time, I think some people were really overrating the season. But I think as time's gone by, I do grow more of appreciation for it. And at number 1 here, the best season of International Survivor for me is Survivor South Africa Philippines, also known as Survivor South Africa Season 6. This is a season that starts off with a bang. I mean, those first few episodes are incredible. I mean, the Sheamus vote out is just a complete cluster of a vote. Again, this is another season that you can consider a train wrecky season, but it's like a train wreck season in the best possible way, where people are playing hard, they're playing strategically, they're doing things that aren't necessarily in their best interest, but they think that's in their best interest. Like, they're playing it in a way where they're trying to win. It's just they're all like really misguided in the way that they're thinking. And I think the biggest proof of that is the rock draw in episode 2. Again, the fact that we get a rock draw in the second episode is insane. And the fact that the rock draw takes out the person who was just designated the leader of the tribe is even funnier. And the season just overall has a lot of really fun gameplay moments. I mean, we see the Marishka vote is really fun, where like Palessa finds the idol in front of everybody, and Tom thinks he's in really hot water there. We have the Tevin blindside, which is a really big factor on the season. We have the immunity train tribal, where Palessa, PK, and Werner all play their idols in a row, and that causes a tie vote, and that's really great. We have Palessa not playing her idol, despite her being one of the only people not in the majority, which is just insane. Like, there's so many really fun elements of this season. I think the downside, though, is that the end stretch there, like the final 6 and 7 rounds, are really, really slow. Thankfully, it does pick up with the final 5 round, which is, again, another fantastic one, where Werner uses his idol on Jean and takes out Katinka, and then Werner gets taken out the very next round, and we have Tom as a winner, which is just completely ridiculous. So, I mean, it does rebound, but like I think that stretch, the final 6, final 7 rounds, are pretty slow. But I think something that this season has that really elevates it above all the other seasons for me is just how strong of a cast it has, where I think the entire cast is really great. I mean, like, there's really one dud, and that's Stacey Lee, who gets voted out 3rd. And everyone else on the season is fantastic TV, and they're ridiculous TV. They make for the most ridiculous season of Survivor ever, but it's so fascinating. I get to see Werner in the first episode eat an idol clue, and he's the guy that dominates the season. He's the best player of the season. Like, that's completely mind-blowing to me. The winner of the season is someone who's actively getting in fights with people all the time. Like, it really is just an insane season that is just consistently entertaining. Like, despite the strategy of the game really slowing down at points, the actual episodes are still really fun to watch. So for me, that keeps it here at number 1. So there we go. That is my season ranking for every international season in the English language of Survivor. So obviously next up will be the winner ranking that will be coming up not too far down the road. And then we'll eventually see when I get around to doing the global ranking, because I did say I was going to do that, do a list of international and US in one list. So we'll be doing a season and winner ranking for that sometime down the road, though don't expect it too soon. But yeah, that is the video. That is my season ranking for International Survivor. Thank you for watching.